This is Thomas Loson for SEScoops, and my guest today is a man who, former X Division champion for Impact Wrestling, former X Division Impact Tag Team champion, three-time Impact Year End Award winner. But today, you probably know him best as the Impact Wrestling World Champion, Alex Shelley. How are you today, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited because obviously big things are happening with Impact Wrestling right now. Huge things. The biggest right now, of course, is next year, January 13th, Hard to Kill, the move to TNA Wrestling. The wrestling world is excited. You were there at Bound for Glory, obviously, when the announcement was made by Scott D'Amore. What's been the reaction like within TNA, well, within Impact, soon to be TNA about the move?
Right. So I knew about the name change beforehand. And at that point, I think everybody was pretty confident it was going to be a good idea for a number of reasons. And when the announcement actually happened, I believe that most people were actually surprised by how well it was received. Like it wasn't just a good idea, it turned out it was a great idea. We had the UK tour immediately after Bound for Glory, and if I had to count how many times there were TNA chants during these shows, I'd probably lose track.
I was one of
Um,
them. I was there in Newcastle Turning Point, one of the crowd,
sure,
TNA all the way.
yeah, yeah. So I think people are very, very eager for that to happen, and they don't have to wait much longer.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the UK tour. Like I said, I was there. You were part of the first night. You suffered an injury during during the events. It ultimately meant that you couldn't make it for the rest of the tour. Like that's got to be disappointing for you, though, to like because it was TNA's first, it was Impact's return to the UK as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, ultimately, wrestling's a contact sport, right? So it's not a matter of if you're going to get hurt, it's when, and then it's how bad is it. And I'm very
Mm.
fortunate that I have a more moderate injury, bordering on mild, rather than anything that was highly serious. But if you can't perform, you can't perform. I mean, that's all there is to it, right? So, discretion being the better part of valor, I only wrestled on the first night, not the remaining three. But I don't think anybody was terribly disappointed. It sounds like the reception for the tour was pretty positive overall.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm actually right now. I'm wearing my Impact Wrestling T-shirt right now, which I bought on the tour. So obviously, I had a great time there. But we're moving on from the UK tour. We're moving on next month. Final resolution, December 9th in Toronto. You're going to be teaming up with Chris Sabin, Motor City Machine Guns, against Josh Alexander and Zack Sabre Jr. I mean, what's it been like for you to be teaming with Chris Sabin again?
Oh, I mean, at this point, it's like probably every third match is teaming with Chris Sabin. So,
I mean, yeah, but it's like, and also Zack Sabre Jr. He's debuting for Impact Wrestling, and obviously he wants to face arguably one of the best tag teams in Impact Wrestling, past, present, probably future. I mean, what's it been like for you to see talent from all over coming into Impact, especially ahead of the move to TNA next year?
right. I think this year we've had quite a bit of talent come in. And the thing that excites me the most, because I have such a vested interest in the company, is that people come in and the response is, "This is awesome. Like I really enjoy wrestling here. This is a good atmosphere. This is a good company." And when you have this outside perspective come in and validate that, because I know it's a good company, um, it definitely adds a sort of accreditation to it. Will did that when he came in. Other people have been backstage and said the same thing. And I'm eager for Zach to come in and experience what the company is or what it's going to become, rather, in 2024 on January 13th.
Well, we're talking about Hard to Kill, January 13th. It's the day that everybody is excited for. You're going to be like, barring a title change, as long as you can hold up, you're going to be the TNA World Heavyweight Champion in a matter of weeks. You're going to be the banner man for the company. What are you wanting to see from TNA in 2024?
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Like Moose is a former champion, so
Oh yeah, yeah.
never, ever look past an opponent, right? Like it's an old saying in wrestling: anybody can beat anybody else on any given day. But ultimately, to me, it doesn't change anything as far as what I would do, right? Like I'm not going to
Mm.
do anything differently because it's going from Impact to TNA. I'm not going to change how I wrestle, or I'm not going to train differently. I'm not going to think differently. More so, I'm excited for the global perspective of it rather than the local perspective of it. My vision being the local perspective, the global perspective being how everybody else receives it. And I think it'll lead to more growth for the company. That's the bottom line. And that's the reason they're doing it. I'm excited for that growth. I'm excited for more people to see all the hard work that people have been putting into this company. Oh, shoot, since I joined it, many, many years ago, up until the most recent set of tapings. And there are people who really put their soul into their wrestling, and the wrestling happens to be in a TNA ring, an Impact ring. It'll be awesome to expose that to a new audience.
I mean, like I said, I just can't understress how excited that everybody is for it. And you talk about, obviously, you were with TNA before, you've been with TNA from the start, then you left, you come back, you left, you came back, it was Sacrifice last year. What was it that like brought you back to Impact, soon to be TNA last year?
Honestly, it was Jay White. Jamie is somebody who I absolutely love with all my heart. The relationship we have is very, very deep, and my life wouldn't be the same without him. When Impact reached out to me, it was specifically to wrestle him. And I was in a position in life where I had started wrestling again about 6 months prior, after finishing up my inoculation series and getting conditioned, ready to come back. And I was hitting the indies really hard and experiencing all these new things and still working in PT. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted yet. It was the match with Jamie that made me want to wrestle for a livelihood again and really do nothing but wrestling. And of course, it was him that did that, right? Like it's just somebody that has had a very pronounced impact on my life, no pun intended. And I'm so happy for him, and I'm so proud of him. But yeah, the short answer is it was Jay White that brought me back.
I mean, obviously, he's doing huge things right now. Like he's on the cusp of possibly the biggest win of his career coming up. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to uh, Moose, your challenger, who is going to be facing you at TNA Hard to Kill 2024. What's the strategy going into that match? Because, like you said, former world champion, he's been dominated competition. This is his Feast of Fire match. What's your thoughts? And like, can you lay out a strategy for someone like that?
Yep, absolutely. So the strategy never changes. The strategy is foolproof, right? You got to trust the process. And my process is utilizing Gordon Soley's 5 points of balance. You have two arms, you have two legs, you have one neck. Typically, you take one of those out, people are working at a disadvantage. You take two of those out, and they're really in trouble. I aim to take two of them out. If you watch any of my matches, there will be 2 points of balance that are attacked. You can watch it with Macklin. You can watch it with Josh. It might be a neck and an arm. It might be an arm and a leg. It might be a leg and a neck. But that's a strategy every single time. And I'll use the same thing against Moose.
Sounds like smart strategy. I mean, it's clearly working for you because obviously, like we said, the Impact World Champion, you won the title from Steve Macklin and against all odds. I mean, what was that like for you at this point in your career to become the guy for Impact Wrestling?
I say that Jay White was what brought me back to Impact, and that's true. Staying in Impact, though, was because of all the opportunities they were willing to give me. And I really had to work my way up consistently. So if you watch everything after that match with Jamie, all the way up until the match with Macklin, I busted my ass, right? Like I won sometimes, I lost sometimes, but ultimately I started winning more than I was losing, put me in line for contention. And really, it took about a year and a half to get there. But what I felt like it was a recognition of hard work and a recognition of just grinding and a recognition of being good, like being better than other people. Not that other people aren't amazing, because that roster is kind of low key, like greatest of all time right now. But I was the best at that point in time. And I worked harder than anybody possibly could have. I showed up early, I left late, I put in 110%. And I know that sounds cliche, but I did these things in order to become champion, and it worked. And when it works, it's just so fulfilling because you feel like, yeah, life's and it's not fair, but I did everything right.
I mean, like I remember watching the match. I was just so excited because, like I said, you've been like you were really one of like the original guys people associate with Impact, and see you finally win the title. A lot of people felt it was in a way overdue. Did you always think that, oh, I'll get to that spot eventually, or were there points where you thought this is never happening for me?
Oh, definitely. Never thought it was going to happen. Definitely. There were points where I thought never going to happen because my relationship with pro wrestling was so staggered. Like I would be immensely in love with it, and then I would be doing it because I knew deep down I loved it, but I might have my energies focused on something else. And part of that was necessary because of the generation I came up in. I mean, I started wrestling in 2002 when there was one company, right? Like, thank God TNA came around. And as somebody who is smaller, you weren't necessarily given a lot of opportunities early on. I wasn't the smallest, but I certainly wasn't the biggest. I remember Conan in 2004. He was a big mentor to me, and he told me, "Shelley, just watch. Wrestling's going to get smaller every year going forward." And holy shit, he's so right. Like he's one of the smartest guys I know, but he was so right. And guys my size, yeah, we're not 6 feet tall, but like at the same time, it's not unbelievable for us to win world championships. And that's really in any sport now. You look at some of the greatest athletes in other sports too, like they're not giants. So I never saw myself as world champion. But when I started to come back to wrestling after medical school in 2019, I thought, I'm going to do this because I love this. I don't have to do this anymore, but I'm coming back because I choose to. And I'm going to treat every match as if it's the last one I can have because you never know when it might be. So I think that sort of perspective really, really benefited me. And honestly, grinding for all the years leading up to that championship win did prepare me to be a world champion.
I mean, like I said, a lot of people felt it was something that they've been wanting to see for years. Because, like you said, you have taken a break from wrestling, and you mentioned earlier you've been trained as a physical therapist, you're certified. How has that like, if anyway, how has that like changed how you see wrestling? Because obviously you've now got such a greater knowledge of the human body, the anatomy. Like, has it changed how you work in the ring, how you see how others work?
Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily change how I wrestle because I was a wrestler first, right? And I know what I can do and what I can't physically. And of course, that changes throughout your lifespan. But what it did do was obviously give me some pretty valuable knowledge in terms of rehabbing something like an injury I suffered in Scotland. Additionally, as far as perspective in life goes, what I realize is we're all literally seconds away from having any sort of function taken away from us. We can do all the right things, but if you're crossing the street at the wrong time and you get hit by a car, that's it. If you're stopped at a stoplight and somebody rear ends you, that's it. So that taught me to enjoy everything that's in front of me and not look too far forward. I was somebody who always wanted to have everything objectively planned out, like A through Z. And I realized that I function a lot better when I just focus on A, B, and C rather than the rest of the alphabet. People will ask me, well, what do you see TNA becoming in 2024? And if you're the face of the company, how is that going to put pressure on you? I don't think about anything except this tag match coming up on December 9th against Josh Alexander and Zack Sabre Jr., and then the match against Moose on January 13th, because I know that these are the most likely things to happen. These are almost definite, almost 100%. You can count on these things happening. And anything beyond that, man, that's out of my control. So I don't even bother with that. I focus on what's in front of me because that's most important.
I mean, sound smart strategy. That being said, you talk about how things are in your control, you're going to control them. If you've got such a stacked roster in Impact Wrestling, like you said, it's possibly the best roster in professional wrestling today, possibly the best roster Impact Wrestling has ever seen. And you face so many of those people, but is there anybody on the roster today that you're yet to step in the ring with who you just really want to get in there right now with?
I think it's more so people that I want to be in the ring with more.
Mm.
I want to wrestle Gresham more. I want to wrestle Speedball more. I want to wrestle Eddie Edwards more. This one is maybe more of an aberrant, but I would probably say Frankie Kazarian, who I've wrestled many, many times, but I haven't wrestled since he came back. We're both wildly different than we were in Ring of Honor. So that would probably be my dark horse pick.
I mean, it's a match that people have seen, but like you said, it's completely be so different these days if it happens. Uh,
Right, right.
I want to cast your mind back to Bound for Glory, uh, Impact Wrestling's Hall of Fame, Tracy Brooks, Mike Tenay, Don West, all being inducted, rightfully so. Unfortunately, Don obviously he passed away last year. It was a huge loss for Impact Wrestling, for wrestling in general. What were your experiences like with Don West?
Oh, they were awesome. Everything that Mike said in his acceptance speech is very, very accurate. And I think most people would attest to that. And I couldn't say anything about Don better than what Mike iterated that day. Uh, he was a guy who was just positive. I don't know if he had bad days, to be honest with you. And if he did, he didn't show them. I've never seen somebody be initially unaccepted by pro wrestling that wanted to be accepted so badly and worked harder than him to do so. Like, this guy put in a lot of effort off the clock to learn more about this industry, and I think that's commendable. I think it showed. Like, they were a great announce team. We didn't really realize what we had until it was too late, and they weren't paired up anymore. But I'm so grateful that they were able to call some of my matches. I really am.
You talk about your matches. It may seem like an obvious one, obviously, with the world title win. Do you have a favorite match from your career that you want everyone to see?
Gosh, a world championship win is always going to be up there, right? Like,
Mm.
especially more recent. Um, some of the other things that have happened, as far as like things off the top of my mind as they relate to Impact specifically, one that was extremely special to me, and I don't know how many people will see this, was my singles match against Tanahashi-san.
Mm.
And Tana was a huge mentor to me. I first met him when he came to TNA in 2007, and then wrestled him in 2008 in the tag team match. Became friends with him for a short period of time. But when I started working full time in New Japan in 2012 under contract, he was who I went to for help or advice. And he was always willing to give it. And he took care of a lot of people. He was the one who really taught me how to be a champion. He
Mm.
was the one who taught me how to lead by example. He was the one who taught me how to play it cool. He was the one who taught me um, basically how to carry yourself. Or really, truly, like, our influences are very similar. Like, he loves Shawn Michaels and Keiji Muto. Well, guess what? Me too. And I think we bonded over that style too. Even still, like in that singles match, I still learned a ton from him. To me, you don't get to wrestle too many of your heroes. And I'm very fortunate to have been raised by the previous generation that I grew up watching. I was trained by Sabu. Kevin Nash was a mentor of mine, and I got to work with Mick Foley. But Tanahashi was something special, and still is. And I hope everybody realizes what they have in him, because I know
Mm.
I do.
I mean, he's made a name for himself around the world for good reason, as have you. My last question today is: when your career is over, is inevitable for everybody. What is the legacy of Alex Shelley? Like, what do you want people to think when they think of your name? What do you want them to remember Alex Shelley for?
Honestly, I'd rather you ask that question to the people I helped along the way, and you let them answer it.
Uh, I mean, a lot of people being helped by you, Alex Shelley, the Impact Wrestling World Champion, who will be in action December 9th at Final Resolution, and then at TNA Hard to Kill against Moose with the world title on the line. Alex, thank you for joining us today on behalf of SEScoops.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.